When a Security Operations Center, SOC, tries to explain how it is doing, the hardest part is rarely creating numbers, because most systems can produce counts, times, and charts. The hard part is earning trust, because leaders have seen dashboards that look impressive yet fail to predict or prevent real problems, and analysts have seen metrics used in ways that feel unfair or disconnected from reality. Communicating performance is therefore not a reporting exercise, but a credibility exercise that depends on honesty, clarity, and relevance. The goal is to tell a story that makes sense to executives who care about risk and resilience, while also feeling respectful to the teams doing the day-to-day work. If leaders do not trust the metrics, they will ignore them, and if teams do not respect the metrics, they will disengage or learn to game them. A mature SOC learns to communicate performance in a way that is evidence-driven, context-rich, and aligned to shared goals. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Trust begins with definitions, because two people can look at the same number and imagine completely different meanings if the underlying terms are vague. Leaders might hear incidents and think confirmed business-impacting events, while analysts might hear incidents and think any investigation opened for a suspicious signal. If the SOC cannot clearly define what an alert is, what a case is, what an incident is, and what it means to resolve something, then every metric built on those words becomes shaky. Clear definitions also protect teams, because they prevent the unfair situation where someone is judged against a number that measures something different than what they were asked to do. For beginners, it helps to see that definitions are not bureaucracy, but the foundation of honest measurement. When the SOC shares metrics, it should be able to explain what the metric includes, what it excludes, and why those boundaries exist. This is how metrics become a shared language rather than a source of argument. A trusted metric also needs a trustworthy data foundation, because even a well-defined metric becomes misleading if the underlying data is incomplete or inconsistent. If one system stopped logging for a day, if a new data source suddenly increased visibility, or if a classification rule changed, the metric might move dramatically without any real change in performance. Leaders tend to notice when numbers shift in confusing ways, and they quickly conclude that the dashboard is noise. Analysts notice too, and they conclude that metrics do not reflect their effort or the true difficulty of the work. The solution is not to hide data issues, but to surface them as part of the performance story, explaining what changed and how that affects interpretation. A SOC that admits data limitations and explains them clearly often earns more trust than a SOC that pretends every chart is precise. Credible communication is not about perfection, but about transparent reasoning that matches reality. Once definitions and data reliability are addressed, the next step is choosing metrics that leaders and teams both recognize as meaningful. Leaders typically care about outcomes such as reduced risk, reduced impact, faster recognition of real threats, and improved resilience when incidents occur. Teams care about operational reality such as signal quality, clarity of workflows, and whether investigations are becoming more consistent and less wasteful. If you communicate only volume, like tickets closed, leaders may doubt that the work is reducing risk, and teams may feel pressure to close quickly rather than correctly. If you communicate only high-level outcomes without operational context, teams may feel the story ignores real constraints like noisy alerts and missing telemetry. A balanced message connects outcome measures to operational drivers, showing how improvements in signal quality, visibility, and process consistency contribute to faster, more accurate decisions. This balance is what makes metrics feel honest and useful to both audiences. When both sides see themselves in the story, trust and respect grow together. How you frame metrics matters as much as which metrics you choose, because raw numbers without context invite the wrong conclusions. A leader may see an increase in alerts and assume security is worse, while the real story could be that visibility improved and the team is now detecting issues that were previously invisible. An analyst may see a goal to reduce response time and assume quality will be sacrificed, while the real story could be that automation and better context are removing wasted steps. The SOC should therefore communicate what changed, why it changed, and what the organization is doing in response, rather than simply presenting a metric as good or bad. It also helps to communicate trends over time instead of one isolated snapshot, because trends are harder to misinterpret than single points. When you tell the story with context, you prevent the common failure where metrics become a blame tool instead of a learning tool. Respectful communication makes it clear that numbers are signals to guide improvement, not weapons to punish effort. Leaders also need segmentation, because performance is rarely uniform across all types of work, and averages can hide both success and risk. If high-severity cases are handled quickly but low-severity cases accumulate, the average may look acceptable while backlog risk grows quietly. If one alert category is extremely noisy, it can dominate time and distort overall metrics, making the SOC look slow even when it is highly effective in the areas that matter most. Segmentation means breaking metrics down by severity, by category, by source, or by asset criticality, so the story reflects the real shape of work. This is not about drowning people in detail, but about showing the few breakdowns that explain the main constraints and priorities. A segmented view also helps leaders fund the right improvements, because it reveals where investment will reduce risk most. For teams, segmentation feels respectful because it acknowledges that not all cases are equal in complexity or impact. When metrics are segmented intelligently, they stop being simplistic judgments and become a map for better decisions. Teams respect metrics when the measures reflect quality, not just speed, because quality is what keeps responders honest under pressure. If the only celebrated measure is time to close, analysts learn to close quickly even when uncertainty remains, which increases the chance of missed threats and repeated incidents. A more respectful approach includes quality signals such as how often cases are reopened, how often escalations are later reversed due to weak evidence, or how consistently playbooks are followed for key categories. These kinds of measures show that the SOC values correctness and defensibility, not just throughput. Leaders also benefit because quality measures help predict long-term risk, since poor triage quality often leads to bigger incidents later. Communicating quality does not require perfect measurement, but it does require a willingness to explain how confidence was assessed and how decisions are validated. When teams see quality recognized, they feel their judgment is valued rather than rushed. That sense of respect improves morale and reduces the quiet incentive to hide uncertainty. Another way to build trust is to connect metrics to concrete operational improvements, because leaders and teams both become skeptical when the same numbers repeat month after month without visible action. If a metric shows noisy signals, the communication should include what the SOC is doing to improve tuning, reduce false positives, or enrich context so triage becomes faster and more accurate. If a metric shows long waiting times at handoffs, the communication should include what escalation or ownership changes are being pursued and what support is needed from partner teams. If a metric shows limited visibility on critical systems, the communication should include a plan for improving telemetry and what risks exist until that gap is closed. This turns performance communication into a conversation about progress rather than a report about problems. Leaders are more likely to trust metrics when they see that metrics drive decisions, and teams are more likely to respect metrics when they see that metrics lead to fixes, not just scrutiny. A story of measurement without action feels pointless, but a story of measurement guiding change feels professional and fair. It is also essential to communicate uncertainty honestly, because the fastest way to destroy trust is to act certain when the data cannot support certainty. In security operations, some metrics are estimates, some are incomplete due to missing telemetry, and some are influenced by external conditions like changes in threat activity or business operations. A trusted SOC does not hide these realities but explains them in plain language, stating what is known, what is suspected, and what is being done to improve confidence. This is not weakness, because leaders understand that complex systems produce imperfect measurement, and they often trust teams more when those teams are candid. Teams also respect this approach because they know from experience where the data is messy and where metrics can be misleading. By acknowledging limitations, You avoid the trap where leadership makes high-stakes decisions based on numbers that are not stable. Honest uncertainty also creates a clear improvement target, because if a metric is weak due to data gaps, closing those gaps becomes part of the maturity plan. Trust grows when communication matches reality. Because different audiences process information differently, strong performance communication adjusts depth and language without changing the underlying truth. Leaders generally want a small number of outcome-oriented indicators that show risk direction, readiness, and major constraints, along with a clear statement of what is being improved next. They do not usually need a long tour of every data source, but they do need to understand what the numbers imply for business resilience and where investment will reduce risk. Teams need more operational detail because they are the ones who must execute changes, tune detections, and follow playbooks, and they need metrics that reflect the true difficulty of the work. The key is consistency across audiences, meaning the leader's summary should match the team reality rather than telling a different story for convenience. When leaders hear a simple narrative and teams hear a deeper version that aligns with it, the organization becomes aligned around the same priorities. Misalignment happens when leadership hears everything is improving while teams experience daily breakdowns, and that gap is what destroys respect. Good communication ensures the story is coherent at every level. A respectful metric culture also avoids personalizing performance, because security operations outcomes are usually driven by systems and conditions rather than by individual heroics. If metrics are used to rank analysts or to punish individuals for slow closures, teams will respond by avoiding hard cases, suppressing uncertainty, and focusing on the number rather than the mission. The better approach is to measure process health, signal quality, and system flow, then use those measures to improve the environment in which analysts work. This communicates that leadership understands the difference between effort and constraints, which earns respect quickly. It also improves actual outcomes because systemic fixes reduce error and speed up decision-making across the entire team. When metrics are framed as a shared instrument panel for the operation, rather than as a scoreboard for individuals, people are more willing to report problems honestly. That honesty improves data quality and makes future metrics more reliable, creating a positive loop. Trust grows when measurement is clearly tied to improvement, not to fear. Another important communication habit is to explain trade-offs explicitly, because SOC performance is often a balance between speed, coverage, and precision. If you tune alerts aggressively to reduce noise, you might reduce false positives, but risk missing weak signals unless visibility and analytics improve at the same time. If you expand visibility by adding more data sources, you may increase alert volume temporarily while the team learns how to interpret new signals and adjust baselines. If you set strict time targets, you may improve responsiveness, but must also protect investigation quality through playbooks and validation steps. Leaders trust metrics more when they see these trade-offs acknowledged, because it shows the SOC is thinking like a risk management function rather than a ticket factory. Teams respect metrics more when trade-offs are made visible, because it communicates that leadership does not expect impossible perfection. Trade-off communication also clarifies why certain improvements are sequenced in a particular order, which reduces confusion when progress is not linear. A mature SOC explains the balance it is pursuing and why. To keep performance communication credible over time, the SOC should show not only what happened, but what was learned and what changed as a result. This learning view can include improvements made after hunts or incidents, closures of visibility gaps on critical assets, new playbooks that reduced tree-off variability, or reductions in recurring false positives through tuning. The emphasis is on demonstrating that the program is becoming more capable, not just that it is staying busy. Leaders often respond well to this because it shows maturity and stewardship of investment, and teams respond well because it shows that their experience is shaping the operation. Learning also creates a forward-looking narrative, which is important because security is dynamic and the organization needs confidence that the SOC can adapt. When performance communication includes learning, it becomes less about defending past outcomes and more about building future resilience. This approach also reduces the anxiety that metrics create, because the story acknowledges that improvement is iterative and that metrics exist to guide that iteration. In a healthy culture, The SOC communicates progress as a continuous loop of measure, learn, change, and verify. A final ingredient in trust is consistency of cadence and message, because sporadic reporting tends to feel reactive and political. When metrics are shared only after a bad incident or only when someone asks, people assume the numbers are being used to justify a narrative rather than to guide steady improvement. A consistent cadence, paired with clear definitions and stable segmentation, helps everyone build intuition about what normal looks like and what a meaningful change looks like. It also creates predictable opportunities to request support, such as investment in telemetry, staffing adjustments, or process changes with partner teams. For teams, consistent communication reduces surprise and makes goals feel stable rather than shifting, which increases respect. For leaders, consistency makes it easier to compare periods and see whether initiatives are working, which increases trust. The key is that cadence should not become a ritual with no decisions. It should be a rhythm that produces action and follow-through. When cadence, decisions, and outcomes stay linked, performance communication becomes a durable part of operational maturity. In closing, communicating SOC performance with metrics leaders' trust and teams' respect is about more than presenting numbers, because it is about building a shared, credible understanding of how the operation is protecting the organization and how it is improving over time. Trust is earned through clear definitions, reliable data foundations, segmentation that reflects real work, and transparency about limitations and trade-offs. Respect is earned through metrics that recognize quality and defensibility, avoid personal blame, and lead to real operational improvements that reduce noise and uncertainty. The strongest communication connects outcomes to operational drivers, adapts depth for different audiences without changing the truth, and shows learning as a continuous cycle rather than a one-time report. When metrics are used as guidance and evidence, not as a weapon, leaders are more willing to invest and partner teams are more willing to cooperate, which makes improvements achievable. The result is an operating model where performance communication strengthens alignment, strengthens morale, and strengthens security outcomes, because everyone can see progress and believe it.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.